That is our big story. Here's the schedule. It actually starts tonight. Nebraska and Rutgers on FS1. 5 games tomorrow, 3 of them here on the Big Ten Network. Both Ohio State and Michigan on the road tomorrow. Really intriguing primetime game in Champaign. We've got lots to dissect. So let's dive in and let's do it sequentially. Joshua, let's start with the game tonight, Rutgers and Nebraska. What stands out to you about this one?
All right, so Rutgers is a team that we know is they're still emerging. They're still building their culture. They're still building their personnel. And one thing that they've done to try to create edges in games is creative play calling. So go back to the Iowa game, the opening kickoff. They got the scarlet uniforms on. They've got a guy laying down in the end zone. They muffed the kick, but they were getting ready to do a throwback. Then you flip it to the Ohio State game. I believe they had 4 different players take snaps at quarterback on the first drive of that game. They capitalize on a muff punt. Right after that, they go for an onside kick, and then I think they tried to do another one coming out of halftime that just wasn't executed very well. So this is a team that's going to have their full complement of plays open, and that's how they're going to attack. Nebraska needs to be aware of that. On the flip side, and Coach, you have very good experience with this, but Mickey Joseph, first time going on the road and you're doing it on a short week. What does that look like? How do you interact with players? How do you get them set to go?
Yeah, before I get to the travel, because it really is an issue. You know, Greg Schiano is one of those coaches that will find anything to motivate a team. I mean, this being a night game at Rutgers is really important to him. My guess is they're going to have a good crowd. But playing a brand name like Nebraska, even though they're not having a lot of success, that's important to Rutgers. That's important to Greg Schiano. And he is a motivator with external things. But Joshua was right. So this is Mickey Joseph's first travel, right? Travel's a sensitive thing in athletics, right? I mean, I've worked for coaches that, you know, if you breathe too loud, you know, it's too loud at the pregame meal. Yep. What's your behavior on the plane? What do you do on the road? How do you dress? So a lot of the emotion with Mickey taking the job, that's behind him now, right? He's won a game. They've had a week off. He's changed defensive coordinators. Yes. Bill Bush, a man that you know. And so now he's in a routine. And so I think the way they travel will be interesting, but it's a big game for them, too. I mean, you know, this game, I think Mickey's one of those motivators as well.
Yes, he is.
You know, Scott wasn't. You know, Scott used to say, if I have to motivate my team, I've recruited the wrong guys. Yep. These two coaches, they believe in external motivation.
100%. And talking about how different guys do it, it's a great point. Like, I can remember sitting in team meetings and with Coach Meyer, he wanted to be very loose, but there was also a unique structure to the way that it went. When I got to the NFL, some of the coaches were like, you guys are all grown men. Just come and go as you please. Like, they didn't care. Some coaches are suit and tie. Everything that we do on the road, we're going to be dressed up. Other coaches are like, why would I make you do that? You're sitting on a plane. You're sitting on a bus. Let's wear the sweats. So this is something that he's going to have to figure out. You brought up the name Bill Bush, who is now the interim defensive coordinator at Nebraska. He was a quality control coach at Ohio State my senior year in 2015. And he worked with Chryst before at Wisconsin, I believe. Tell you about this guy. He understands how to simplify the game of football in a very unique way, because we used to get breakdowns and cut-ups and tip sheets from him that had the simplest keys on how you could get the job done. And so you flip it to Nebraska's performance with him as defensive coordinator so far. They're playing a lot of cover 1. They're playing some cover 3. They have simplified the defense so guys can go out there and attack and play fast. And I think that's the most important thing he could have done.
You know, everyone talks so highly of Bill Bush. I met him when we were at camp this summer. You were talking about him back then. But, you know, Mickey in his press conference, and Trev Alberts alluded to this when he named him, he was going to make a major change. And one of the major changes, Mickey thought this: we have to simplify the defense, and we're going to have 9-on-7, and we're going to tackle in practice. And so we're seeing the results of Mickey's probably first major decision.
It's back to basics.
As the interim coach.
Yeah, and it's paying off a little bit.
Right, but with the rules on tackling and trying to protect the players, you know, it's a fine line. Nobody wants to get their players hurt in practice, but you still have to be a little bit more physical maybe than Nebraska was before Mickey took over.
I mean, truthfully, the defense won them that game last week, and they thought of that, I mean, even a week before, even a day before, to say the defense is going to win the game, right? But, I mean, held Indiana 5 yards in the fourth quarter. I mean, they were really good down the stretch in that game. So,
well, if you watch Urban Analysis, you'll notice that a block punt was the reason they won the game.
Oh. But look at this guy. It's like he's done TV before. We might talk about that
they
later.
might not have won the game without the block punt, but I don't think the block punt won them the game.
That's better said. That's why you're there. And
I don't know. I'm not sure why.
I was not ready for all the chaos today, guys.
That's for others to figure out. What about Ohio State and Michigan State? Ohio State is a bad matchup for a lot of people, Joshua. It feels like a uniquely bad matchup, though, for Michigan State, given the issues that they have defensively.
A lot of issues. And defensively, we've seen what the secondary looks like, and it's a continuation of last year for Michigan State. They cannot get the stops that they need. And I think their defensive line is taking a step back, too, because one of the things that we counted on a year ago out of Michigan State is that, well, they might give up some big plays over their head, but that defensive line is going to create sacks and TFLs, and they're not doing it the same way. That's trouble. Their offense is in trouble as well because Kenneth Walker III is not there. Peyton Thorne does not seem to be as comfortable as he looked a year ago. Jaden Reed was out, but haven't really gotten him back into the flow of things. I mean, there are a lot of questions and a lot of issues that go into it. And the last team you want to play when you got issues on both sides of the ball is this current Ohio State team because we know what they can do offensively. Ohio State has made so many strides on the defensive side of the ball. And I still think they have yet to be challenged by a team who can really stretch the field. But look at the tape, look at the statistics. This is a good defense. So Michigan State's going to be in for a long day.
I agree with what you said about both sides of the ball. I would intensify when Ohio State has the ball early because what Ryan Day wants to do is he wants to be very explosive in the pass game early in the game. If he can get a lead, then he can start calling the game balanced. And the other thing, big picture-wise, both these teams were 11-2 a year ago, right? And for Ryan, he made coaching changes because it wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
So he changed defense. He brought in Justin Fry to coach the offensive line. Mel Tucker, on the other hand, you go from 11-2 to really struggling. I think Kenneth Walker had a lot to do with it. But my point is that's how far Ohio State is from everybody else. Maybe not Michigan. Michigan closed the gap last year. But think of two teams that were 11-2 last year. One coach got a gazillion-dollar contract extension, and another one said it wasn't good enough. Yeah. It's just so interesting that you can have the same record and a different response 12 months later.
No doubt. And look, there was a pretty big gap between them last year, too, because Ohio State absolutely wiped the field with Michigan State a year ago, 56-7. You mentioned the strong starts for Ohio State, and that has to concern you if you're Michigan State because last 3 games they've been outscored 56-21 in the first half.
And getting behind in games has been one of the other issues for this Michigan State offense because the fact that they can't sustain drives is one thing. They've been playing from behind, trying to throw the ball around the yard, so they can't actually find a true rhythm either. That's a tough spot to be in.
No doubt.
What about Michigan, the other really highly ranked team in the Big Ten? They have Indiana. This also feels like a mismatch on paper. It's been a mismatch on the field almost every year aside from 2020 when Indiana figured out a way to beat the Wolverines. What do you see when these two get together tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, this is a vintage Jim Harbaugh offense. We're seeing the tight ends being utilized. The offensive line is playing extremely well. Blake Corum, I say it every time I'm on here, he's sensational. The guy's a really good football player. And so they're leaning on that. And J.J. McCarthy is coming along. We saw him early on in the year where it was routes on air, and now they kind of pulled him back a little bit, and he's pulled back his production a little bit, just relying on all the other pieces. And quite frankly, I think this is how Jim Harbaugh likes to play the game. So Indiana, you have to be patient. And you have to capitalize on any of the mistakes that Michigan may make because this is a team that's just going to try to go out and play old school football. For Michigan, I love the direction of their defense, and I think that they can challenge throws in the secondary. Mike Sainristil has been really good moving over from offense to defense. Indiana's got to be on alert for that because we've seen miscues in games, and we've also seen them get off to really bad starts and have to play catch-up. This Michigan team's not a team that you're playing catch-up against.
I'm going to put Michigan in the same box as I put Ohio State, which is a good box to be in, right? Because Jim Harbaugh, during the offseason, for the first time that I ever can remember, a Michigan coach saying that our goal was to win the national championship. The culture at Michigan's always been, we want to win the Big Ten championship and we want to go to the Rose Bowl. Now, because of recruiting and because of Ohio State's success, I think that Michigan has now, and they've been in the playoffs, Michigan is now saying we want to win the national championship as well. So I'm going to put him in the same box. I'm going to expect more from him. So when you look at their offense, and Joshua, you mentioned this, they have closed down their formations. They are playing with more tight ends and more closed formations than they played last year. More like when Josh Gaddis first came to Michigan. The other thing is JJ is still a young quarterback. And he's thrown the out route better recently. He was struggling with the out route earlier. He threw a pass on the run that was just phenomenal athletically.
Yes.
And yet he threw the ball once when he was in the grasp. Quarterback never throws the ball when he's in the grasp. And he's young and impatient because he doesn't believe that incompletions can be good. Well, when you are in the pocket and you are getting pressured, an incompletion is fine. And he has to learn that. So JJ can come along a long ways.
This is the thing that we talked about with J.J. McCarthy is he's going to make some of those plays.
Right.
You know, you said when you're falling down, you're not throwing the ball. Well, throwing it on the run sometimes the way that he does, a lot of guys aren't doing either. So it's a double edge with him. The completion percentage thing is so funny to me, though, because I think a lot of quarterbacks nowadays, I'm not saying this is J.J. McCarthy, they rely on that number so much. Like they really,
And he leads the nation.
He does.
By the way.
He does. And so there is this idea that I don't want to throw an incompletion. I don't know if he's playing like that, but I know some guys who coach like that. So, again, young quarterback, I agree with that. He's been very good. And I think they're in a place offensively where they should not and do not have to put too much on his plate so he can continue to see the game and learn and grow and develop through playing it.
Yeah, one of the balls that he forced, the guy was double covered.
Yeah.
That can't happen. An incompletion is better than that.
I watched C.J. Stroud throw a ball into double coverage last week against Rutgers, too. Like, some of the best do it. So.
Yeah, no
And
doubt.
if you look at Indiana's defense, they have not been great, admittedly, but they cause some havoc, right? They force a lot of turnovers. Their sack numbers are pretty good. Yeah. So they have a chance. I mean, I'm not saying they're going to win the game, but I'm just saying they can do some things that to a young quarterback might be disruptive and might get him a little off balance.
They'd also like to play less plays.
Yeah.
They should like to play less
Yeah, that's
plays.
what I'm saying.
They better like to play less plays.
The Indiana defense has a fast secondary, which is going to be challenging for a young quarterback because the windows, they open and shut so quickly. So he's got to be aware of that. And then McCullough up front, just athletically, good player.
Tomorrow we got a triple header of football here on the Big Ten Network. Kicks off with Purdue against Maryland. Then it's a pair of West Division matchups. Wisconsin takes on Northwestern, followed by a primetime clash between Iowa and Illinois. It all starts with Big Ten tailgate tomorrow, only on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. Let's start with Purdue and Maryland. I think this is a really interesting game. I mean, you look at just from a divisional race point of view, right? The winner is 2-1 in their conference race. You could certainly make an argument for Purdue in the West. Maryland, it's going to be hard for them to get past the top three there in the East, but certainly, jockeying for position here. I think this is a fascinating game, and I think these are two teams that are really playing well.
This is a fascinating game, and from the Maryland standpoint, I just want to say this is I think it's going to be really difficult to judge this team at the end of the year by what their win-loss record is because of the division that they play in. This is a very good football team that I think if their schedule aligned differently, they might have more wins at the end of the year. But looking at the X's and O's of this game, I'm very interested in what Purdue decides to do offensively. Because a week ago against Minnesota, they come out, I formation, they run lead. Then the next play, they run a counter. And both of those plays were very productive, positive yardage runs. Then on the second drive, second play, they run a play action pass off of the counter look. So they're building the passing game in that game based off of what their run plan was. They came out with a heavy dose of run. Something we don't typically see, something we know that they really don't want to do at times. And so it's just really unique. And I think for Maryland, it's always harder to defend a team that is multidimensional. When you know that a team can hit you with I formation, you know that they can hit you with some of the counters, and they're going to run their regular zone runs, but they're going to get into spread formations as well. Not only do you have to defend the run and the pass, but now you have to defend different personnels and different formations, and what type of team are they when they get into those personnels and formations. That's the chess match that I'm going to be looking at when Purdue has the ball is can they replicate an offense that has as much dimension as it did a week ago?
You mentioned Maryland and who they play in the East as maybe a way that is going to maybe have a good season but not be as good enough. The opposite is true of Purdue, right? Yeah. Purdue has already played Penn State. The other crossover after Maryland is Indiana. Indiana's like a fake crossover. It's a rival game, right? It's always going to be a matchup opponent, right?
Fake crossover. I thought he was talking basketball here.
So if Purdue beats Maryland, they're done with the East. And now they've got the tiebreaker against Minnesota. What you said about Purdue's offense, right? It's incredible what Jeff Brom did last week. Not only the stats that you mentioned, but they out-timed. They had time of possession. Yes. They threw the ball more. They ran the ball more than Minnesota did. So they turned that Maryland thing, the Minnesota thing, upside down. How that relates to the Maryland game? I think that Brian Williams has done a terrific job with the defense. Yes, they have certainly improved. This will be a test how he and the defensive staff can make adjustments, because Jeff Brom is going to give them something they haven't prepared for, because that's what Jeff Brom does. And they know that. So they've got to be on high alert. We've done really good work on defense. Let's make the adjustments we have to make.
What do you say, Jeff Brom likes to draw it up in the dirt?
Draw it up in the dirt. You know, he's not a system guy.
He's not. But the schemes, the concepts that he has available in the way that he puts them in the game plan is very unique. Because I also saw an offense that at times it's difficult, but they didn't make so many mistakes that they would lose a game in a game plan that looked very different than what they typically do. So it means that he's doing a solid job of actually teaching the concepts too.
I think the big thing that really strikes me about Purdue and where they are different this year, I mean, obviously it's running the football, but where it shows up is in the red zone, guys.
Sure.
Like their red zone touchdown percentage is 85%. It was 47% last year. And so when you think about, are you able, when you get down there, we talked about it in the opener against Penn State, they weren't able to run the ball and run out the clock, right? And I guess I just assumed that was who they were going to be again. But now all of a sudden, if you can pound the ball in when you're down inside the 5-yard line, I think that changes the equation dramatically, and I think you win some of those games that you didn't win.
I would venture to say that they chose not to run the football in the opener rather than
right. But when you make a choice like that, my assumption, and I think the assumption of a lot of people, is they're making that choice because they know they can't do it.
I think they might be making that choice because they've been in that mentality for so long. You know,
yeah.
Coach Brom's still an old quarterback calling plays. And situationally, regardless of if you can actually run it with success, in that very situation, just running the football serves the purpose of burning up the clock. Like, that's where you really start to ask the question. It's not even about continuing a drive. It's about, can we make this a situation where we burn up clock and we put more pressure on the other guys?
Well, you know, obviously the field shrinks, so the defensive backs are not worried about the deep ball. So that you basically add two more defenders to the run. So I mean,
that's why teams can play cover two in the red zone.
I'm in between you two about Purdue's run game, because when you look at Penn State's run game, they only had 98 yards against Purdue, and now we see how Penn State can run the ball. I would say the same thing about Purdue. I mean, Jeff Brom wants to throw it, but he knows he has to run it. So I think maybe it's been a little bit more gradual. Plus, he changed the formation up, as you mentioned, against Minnesota, the I formation, and that helped them with the run.
Yeah, I guess I'm just saying, if you're 4th and 1, are you lining up in the shotgun and, you know, like...
You ask Russell Wilson. I mean, if you watched the Thursday night game last night and you watched the Super Bowl when they were right there on the goal line, these cats, I'm not going to get into it because I'm a defensive guy. I see a lot of things in football that don't necessarily make sense. Like guys get into the shotgun on 4th down and will try to throw the football when the answer is to turn around, hand the pill to your running back, and get downhill.
Yeah. And I guess my point is, I think Purdue can do that now.
Oh, they certainly can.
Certainly in a better position to
choose to do it.
Yes.
What about Iowa and Illinois? This, to me, is just an enormous game. You think about this 3-game stretch for the Illini guys. They beat Wisconsin last week. They have the game against Iowa this week. Then they play Minnesota next week. I mean, it is not unreasonable in any way, shape, or form to think that Illinois can end up in Indianapolis, both by virtue of schedule and by virtue of the fact that they are really good. But these are the games, right? And they already took care of the first one last week, and now you got 2 more here against the other teams. I think people see it's possibly at the top of the West along with Purdue. And it's right there for the taking, and 2 in a row at home as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a heck of a stretch run for Illinois, and they looked really, really good against Wisconsin. And I'm thinking of ways for Iowa to try to create an edge offensively in this game, because I think all of us agree that Iowa's defense is good. I think we all also agree that Illinois has a good offense. So you have a great defense in Illinois, and you have an offense that has really struggled for Iowa. So where do you create an edge?
And I needed two more reallys to accurately portray it.
I almost went there. That's my pen. So this is what I was looking at. I watched the tape, and Illinois basically they ran a bunch of man-to-man, and then they got into some three deep, whether it was straight three deep or ran some invert, changing who's dropping deep. But it was a single high safety all game because they wanted the box count for the run. And that's how you limit a team to 2 yards rushing, is you just load the box. And I think that they can take a similar approach with Iowa. If they do, what Iowa has now is two really good tight ends. We've seen Sam Laporta, but now you've got Lachey over there, who's a great player too. Those can be the mismatch guys, because now if Illinois comes out and says that we're going to put our safeties on tight ends, what do? You run the ball. You get on body, you move those safeties out of the way because your big tight end should be able to block them. If they decide to put a linebacker type on your tight end and they're playing this man-to-man, what do? You throw the ball because they should be good enough athletes that they can get open against the linebacker. That's the edge that I would do. So I would stay in a lot of two tight end, and then I would just try to call their bluff. I would change plays at the line of scrimmage based off of the personnel that Illinois puts out there if they're going to do a similar game plan to what they did a week ago, and see if we can't beat them with that.
Yeah, I think we're right on the defense. They're both really good defensive teams. They're an inside and front. Don't lose contain. Pressure on pressure downs. Other than that, we're going to play it straight. The difference is going to be the offense. I do think that Iowa has improved offensively, and I do think no matter what you want to say about Iowa's offense, Illinois will see the best Iowa offense, right? They're healthier now than they've been. They're out of the I formation. So they can make some ground on the offense. When you talk about the West again, and you mentioned Illinois could be in the West race, there's no doubt they're crossovers. They've already lost to Indiana, and they have Michigan and Michigan State.
Yeah, no, I know.
And so, again,
Michigan State is not. Michigan State's tougher on paper, but they do have to go to Michigan, to your point.
Yeah, and so you lose 2 out of the 3 of the crossovers. Right. If they lose to Michigan, you can be the best team in the West and not go to Indianapolis because of the crossover.
This is very true.
Well, but again, I mean, and this is with all due respect to Indiana, but I mean, that's not a challenging crossover vis-a-vis playing Ohio State. They just happen to lose it.
Correct. It counts for one loss, just like losing to Ohio State.
I understand, but I'm just saying, like, it wasn't like the schedule was stacked against them.
Play devil's advocate in that.
That's very fair.
And Illinois made enough mistakes in that football game, but there was an egregious call that changed the outcome of the game, in my opinion, there too.
Right, yep.
So they should be undefeated at this point, in my mind, with the win in a crossover game, as I look at it. You can't do that because that's not what happened. But let's be real about it. This is a good football team that caught a bad break.
Very good football team, and again, trying to overcome what has been a very difficult decade of football for them. They have not beaten Iowa since 2008. Whoa. Can they do that 1 week after going
Coach played there, didn't he? And he played at Iowa?
He did.
He coached there?
Played and coached there.
He coached at Wisconsin?
Right.
Yeah.
Too emotional. But when you ask a coach, no, it's not about that.
Yeah, okay.
Chryst Orr, part of a long line of outstanding linebackers in Madison, started 30 games for the Badgers, an all-Big Ten pick, finished third in the conference in sacks 3 years ago on a team that made it to the Big Ten championship game and played in the Rose Bowl. Chryst Orr is today's big interview, and in quite a twist, he is here in studio. We don't normally get the big interview here in studio, but in town for the Wisconsin-Northwestern game up in Evanston tomorrow. So start us off with this, Chryst. Help us understand what you're up to. So you're on the staff at Wisconsin as a player development guy, and yet you also played in the USFL this year. So bring us up to date on both of those and how you balance them.
So I'm the director of player development. It was pretty easy. It's pretty fluid. Pretty much just like a mentorship role. I mean, I play with a lot of those guys. I help recruit a lot of them. So it's pretty easy and fluid. They can see me every day, be there. I get my football fix and go watch film. So it's been a lot of fun. And the university worked great and amazing with me to allow me to keep cracking skulls in the USFL, man. I can't get away from it. So it's been fun.
And you were telling us a little bit off air about some of your USFL experiences. What did you enjoy most about spring football?
I think what I enjoyed the most was just sharing, all the heartbreak and heartaches with guys. Like, you hear so many stories, and so many people don't know that there's probably only like 2,500 people in the NFL. Like, you got this guy he got injured and he's just been out for a couple of years. You got a guy that he's undrafted and he started for a couple of years and then got traded or his coach got fired. So many different ways that you can find yourself on the outside looking in. And man, to share those experiences, to know that there's other people out there like you that's fighting for the same dream and same goal. Nothing could have been better.
Right, because you spent some time in the NFL yourself, correct?
Yep.
So take us through kind of from the end of your playing days to everything that happened.
Okay, so I got released from Carolina right before OTAs, like the first day of phase 3 of OTAs. I got released, had a workout with the Patriots, got signed and released same day by the Broncos. I'm just back at home training, chilling, and Coach Chryst calls me and he's like, hey man, like, I know you're not doing much, I know you're not playing, I know you still want to, but I have a role for you that I think you can impact the program a lot. And so me and my wife came out, it was her birthday one week, and we went to a game and ate some steak, and the rest was history from there, to be honest.
Yeah, well, that'll lock up the deal.
Oh yeah, for sure.
A good steak. You mentioned Coach Chryst. Look, this has been a crazy week in Madison. I mean, it's amazing to me to think.
Yeah.
Like, if you would have told us 7 days ago that was going to happen, right? I mean, I think all of us would have just been utterly astonished. So here we are. You're part of the staff. I mean, we're 5 days into this now, but what was your reaction when you heard of Coach Chryst's firing?
I mean, it was tough. It was heartbreaking for me just because he was my coach. I came in his year 1 of being a head coach. It was my freshman year. So we kind of started our journey together. He's such a personable person that it's easy to get close with him. All he wants to know about is you, your family. He has nothing but love for you. But, I mean, it's tough, but, McIntosh made the decision, the university made the decision to go forward, and who you feel for the most are the players, because I had something maybe slightly similar to this when Coach Anderson left, because his staff was the one that recruited me originally. Okay. And he left, but it's a different feeling when your coach leaves versus getting fired. I think Coach Leonhard has done a great job of just rallying the guys and getting them to stick together and keeping that same love for that Motion W, the same love for the program. And, he's openly said that this is still Coach Chryst's team. We're going to finish this season for him. So I think they're doing well, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the player aspect, and that's where my mind initially goes. I mean, these guys have you got a lot of football left in this season, and this is something that Wisconsin can salvage as well. So from your perspective and your role, having interactions with players on a day-to-day basis, how have you kind of guided them and made sure that they've stayed together?
You just tell them to stay focused, man. Like, at the end of the day, like this happened on a Sunday, you got a game in 6 days. Like, you can't forget that, because Northwestern's no slouch. They're 1-4, but we've always given us fits, especially playing there. I think it's a unique environment that, you kind of have to compartmentalize, and it's okay to feel these emotions. It's okay to feel bad. It's okay to feel sad, angry, whatever you're feeling, that's okay. You use those emotions in your play, and you still keep the same focus on the goal ahead, and that's beating Northwestern.
So you played for Coach Leonhard at Wisconsin. So obviously you have experience with him. He's a guy who's going to be taking over right now. What does he bring to the table that everybody, maybe people on the outside of the program, wouldn't know about him?
I think that the biggest thing he brings is just his personality. He's so easygoing, so easy to talk to. You never feel pressured or nervous talking to him the same way that you will with Coach Chryst. So it's pretty seamless, but I think he has a unique perspective because he played. He's not too far removed from his playing days at all. And, I think there's nothing else you can ask for as a player. He puts guys in the best position to succeed, and he's an open book.
So break down this game tomorrow. I mean, you mentioned Northwestern Wisconsin has been one of the more even series in the Big Ten. In fact, if you go back to the beginning of the 2000s, only Ohio State and Penn State have more wins over Wisconsin than Northwestern does. So head-to-head, this has been really good. It's been very competitive. As you said, Northwestern's not having a very good year. What's your sense of the matchup tomorrow in Evanston?
I mean, it's going to be tough. I think that it's a unique environment. I think that's the biggest thing that Northwestern has going for them. A lot of people might talk about them not filling up their stance or whatever the case is, but as a player, that's tough. Like, I would much rather go into the shoe with everybody hating me. I know what it is, and it's everybody on my sideline versus the world is how it feels. But when you go to Northwestern, like, it's quiet. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of energy going on. It's always muggy. The grass is horrible. It's always gray. And you have to bring your own energy. They're a 1-4 team, but they haven't lost a game by more than 10 points. They've been competitive, and they always will be. They're a team that's going to scratch and claw until the end. They've diversified their run game, which I think has helped them out a lot. know, they got a new quarterback, and they're just trying to adjust. They lost 8 starters on defense with the new DC coming in. Anytime you have that, you're going to have some lulls, and man, we're not going to let them get their fitting against us for sure.
Now, Northwestern, when you look at them offensively, it's a team that has done a good job of moving the football. They've had mistakes where they haven't been able to capitalize on drives. Flip it over to the Wisconsin defense. Very young group. It's been up and down. What are the keys defensively for Wisconsin to have success?
I think the keys, especially when you play in Northwestern or any Big Ten team, is you need to make them one-dimensional. You know, you need to stop the run or get after their quarterback, whatever the case is. But, you know, like everybody sitting here knows, you can't get after the quarterback without stopping the run. So I think stopping the run early for Wisconsin is going to be important. I think the turnover margin in this game is a big indicator of who's going to win. You know, this is Big Ten football, man. It's going to be bloody noses, flipping the field. You know, if you can steal a possession defensively or offensively, you know, the odds tip in your favor.
And Northwestern's turned the ball over more than any team in the Big Ten. Graham Mertz has had some turnover issues in his career. What do you see as you watch that Wisconsin offense and it just hasn't gotten untracked? I mean, and I think kind of the low point was that 2 rushing yards last week against Illinois. I mean, it's just unfathomable, right? When you think about Wisconsin, what will it take for them to kind of get it back headed in a direction you would expect it to be in?
Man, I think schematically that people don't understand how tough it is to play quarterback in our scheme. Like you're in a true pro-style scheme. You know, you look at some of these other places and, you know, they're doing hard counts and they're looking to the sideline and their coach is essentially telling them the perfect play to run versus this 2-high safety shell, or we see the safety spin to single high. You know, in college, a lot of safeties don't have the discipline to hold their disguise. So a lot of offenses, the coach is essentially just playing Madden, but in our offense, like you're getting a 2-sentence or like a short paragraph as a play call with a kill and a check to it, and when you come out, you have to read the rotation yourself and make that kill call, make the box count, whatever the case is. So I think it's tough, but I think the way we get back on track is just being who we are. Like we get back to hitting people in the mouth, get back to getting our run game going. You know, the way our offense is built, you have to run the ball. You know, as a team, we want to run the ball, sustain clock, sustain drives, eat up that clock, and finish with points at the other end. And, you know, that's the recipe, man. You play good defense, you get some 3-and-outs, you keep their defense on the field for longer, our offense keeps wearing on them. With our run game, once the run game gets established, you start dropping defenders into the box and with you with a play-action pass.
You know, we talked about the youth on the defensive side, some of the struggles offensively for this Wisconsin team. Obviously, going through a coaching change midseason is something that's difficult for everybody to handle. But when you look in that locker room and you see the guys, how do you view the ceiling of this team this year?
I think this ceiling is super high. This is one of the most talented teams that we've had. And, you know, I don't really say that lightly. They're just inexperienced. You know, it's going to come with time. And they're going to grow from it, to be honest. They remind me a lot of our 2018 team. Like we were the number 4 ranked team coming in, dropped a couple games, dropped one to BYU, lost to Michigan. Everybody kind of wrote us off and we were a game away from being in the Big Ten championship. Or even my last year, like we lost to both Illinois and Ohio State, still ended up in the Big Ten championship and played in the Rose Bowl. So, you know, I think that the biggest thing is that they still have life in their eyes. Like they're not defeated at all. And that's the thing that I'm probably proudest of them for doing, is that they're still, you know, churning forward, still trying to reach their goals. And I think the sky's the limit for this team.
Let's wrap it up with this. Kind of what's next for you? So you're in this role at Wisconsin. You're still playing.
Yeah.
I know you aspire to play for as long as you can, but when you look 5 years down the line, where do you see yourself?
I don't know. I just know that I'm still going to be crazy about football and I'm still going to be crazy about my Badgers. So that's all I know for sure, but I don't know what I'll be doing. You know, hopefully it's something involving ball and the Badgers for sure.
All right. Well, Chryst, this was a ton of fun.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I appreciate y'all having me on.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for coming in.
Of course.
Chryst, former Wisconsin linebacker. Speaking of the Badgers, he'll be watching them tomorrow, and we'll be there as well. All Big Ten, all morning long. Previews of every conference matchup and tons of fun directly from Evanston. Big Ten Tailgate presented by TIAA, Saturday, 10 a.m. Eastern, only on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app.